support you and build unity among the indigenous peoples. October 14th, as we know, proudly honors the enduring legacy of the indigenous communities. It is an enduring legacy that truly continues to inspire us all. This year's theme, Advancing the Cultural Continuity of the Indigenous First People, is a stark reminder of the valuable contribution our indigenous societies continue to play in keeping our cultural traditions alive. Today, we at the ministry proudly celebrate and stand with you to kick off these festivities to mark the celebrations of Heritage Week. First Peoples have existed across Caribbean for more than 500 years and still inhabit the islands of Trinidad and Tobago and are found in communities such as Arima, Toko Cumana, Muruga, Lobino, and Siparia. Even so, we have so many of our communities and villages being named after the Amerindians and these first people. Many of our current practices and influences are steeped in a rich heritage passed on to us from generation to generation. Of course, the fight for recognition was by no means an easy task. However, in 1990, a significant milestone was achieved and the indigenous community was officially recognized. Then, in the year 2000, another milestone was reached. The indigenous community was granted a day of recognition on October 14th. To celebrate this warrior chief Harima and promote the presence of the First Peoples, the ministry recognizes the indelible contribution of the Santa Rosa First Peoples community as a representative of the indigenous community to not only our cultural landscape, but also our development as a nation. And your efforts are indeed to be applauded. We at the ministry look forward to our continued partnership as we keep our cultural tradition alive. In communities across Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry of Sports and Community Development is a proud advocate for community groups which are striving towards the development of our nation as we uplift our unique history, culture, and diversity. We continue to honor your legacy and wish you a meaningful and enjoyable First Peoples Day. I thank you.
We would now like to invite the cultural group with the Sambura.
kagong gomado na ba? Ito marak lasu. Potol gore koi gore kasi kayo ay kasalago. Ero-aro da bare ang konong kasa dana ero-ware ito ba? Kikiwate adul botago moko de duare borema. Ushiwate adul botago moko de duare borema. This like
the song that he's going to sing for you guys that has a meaning. The singing for it's a grandma that shows in her song that
the grandmother and the grandfather, they have all the songs and they give to the young people of the young generation. That's what I'm singing for you. please to dance with me. And okay, Sambra.
Well, we are certainly getting off to a brilliant start of our Heritage Week. And of course, we have many more exciting things in store for you. Before we proceed further, I would like to welcome as well, who I would have forgotten. We have Mr. Mino DiMaggio, our architect. We are always very grateful if you stand, and let's welcome you. And he has been working so assiduously on all the plans, and as I said, the community is very grateful for all the work that you have done for us. We would also like to recognize our councillor for the area, Ms. Jenny Scott. And now, we would like to welcome our feature speaker, Mr. Issa Mohammed. Issa is the president of the Caribbean Institute of Astronomy, our very own astronomer extraordinaire. I will leave him because we have so much that we want to hear from him. We are looking forward so much to his presentation. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Issa.
Testing one. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Issa Mohammed. I'm president of the Caribbean Institute of Astronomy. I just want to say one thing: that presentation we just got deserves another round of applause, please. It's absolutely wonderful, and I'm so thrilled and happy to be here, and so thrilled and happy to see you all. And I have to tell you, this is the most intimidating lecture I have given in decades, because I am here supposedly to tell you all about something that you know better than me. So this one is a difficult one for me, but I am really excited to be here. And I just want to hope, in light of the theme, which is the continuation and preservation of the cultural legacy, that what I present here this evening will resonate with that theme, because it's along the same lines of preserving and transmitting the culture and what we see as important. Okay, so astronomy. And astronomy is the study of the stars, the sky, the celestial objects, the planets, right? I have been involved in astronomy for over 20 years. It's my passion, it's what I love, it's what I do. But last year, I was blessed with the opportunity to visit somewhere that is like the ground zero for astronomy in the world, and that is Chile. Right? I was part of the Astro Ambassadors, the Astronomy in Chile Education Ambassador Program. And I was able to visit some of the top observatories, telescopes in the world, in some of the most breathtaking places in the world. This is the Atacama Desert in Chile. We were like 16,000 feet up in altitude on mountaintops, visiting some of the largest telescopes ever created. I thought that the most incredible thing I would see on this trip would have been the telescopes and the stars and the astronomy, what I went there to see. But I started noticing something as I was there. And you'd see, this is our whole team in the boardroom. If you look at this image, like right over here, there's stuff on the side of the wall, right? And when you look at it, it was stars and patterns. But these are constellations that I don't know. Now, astronomy is what I do. I study the stars, I study the constellations, and my job is to teach people how to recognize constellations in the sky. But I'm seeing in the boardroom that there's things that I don't know what they are. What was happening in Chile? Everywhere you looked, on the streets, in the schools, these are murals on the side of the road, paintings that were done. You're seeing the same patterns showing up over and over, and it's nothing to do with Western astronomy. We were looking at the indigenous astronomy of the Atacamanian people, who looked up at the sky and they saw in the Milky Way the mummy llama and the baby llama, and all of the things that we saw in Chile. This was an indigenous star party that we went to. And we gathered the whole team, and these people, astronomers from all over the world, there's a group of us, about 12 of us, all gathered around a bonfire, while one of the elders in the tribe sang, played, and told stories about the sky. Stories about the ancient people who were up in the universe, and they had a rope that came down, and they were able to descend the rope and come down onto the earth. And then one day an evil shaman cut the rope and broke the connection. And now everybody's trying to remake that connection and get back. These were the stories that they were telling. And all through it all, we look up at the sky, and now every time I see the Milky Way, and this is one of my pictures I got on the trip. I'm an astrophotographer, it's what I do. But every time I see it now, I can't help but see the shapes of the constellations made in the dark areas of the Milky Way. The mummy llama and the baby llama. And striking. They viewed the Milky Way as a river, and there were all these animals scattered along the river come to drink. So there was the llama, there was a shepherd, a toad, a snake, fox. And in the villages, this is San Pedro de Atacama, right? It's a tourist town, right? And all of the little shops had astronomy nights, astronomy photos. The astronomy is in part of all of their tourist setups, where people could go under the dark sky and learn about indigenous astronomy, look at the stars, and it's part of their entire package that they have. I came back from Chile, and I couldn't help but be struck by how much reverence and how much knowledge they had about the indigenous astronomy and how it was propagated in the entire society, to the point where it's on the sides of streets and in schools and everywhere. And I'm thinking, what about me? What about home? This is my home. This is what I do. I'm the astronomer. You know? I'm lucky in that prior to this, I had met this wonderful lady, Dr. Maura Imbert. And from those of us in Trinidad, we would, if you don't know Dr. Maura Imbert, we certainly know her son. He's the current Minister of Finance, Colm Imbert. This is his mom. She unfortunately passed away last year, I believe it was. Very, very sad. But she lived a wonderful life, and she was a stalwart. She was a giant of astronomy in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the things she worked on, and I happen to know her because she printed her books with us, was the Taino stars over Greencastle Hill. And it was a whole research project she did in Antigua. So I had because I worked with her on some of these projects, I had a starting point. And so I delved in, and I looked to see what was written, what was available in the scientific literature, what had been recorded, what I could find. And I stumbled upon a number of papers, a number of books, a number of documents, and I was able to piece together some of these stories. Now, here's the thing. What I am trying to do as part of the Caribbean Institute of Astronomy is take these stories and bring them to the general public in the form of books, in the form of presentations, in the form of stories that people could tell. And so I went looking for these stories. I found a bunch, but what I really want to do is to meet with anybody from our region, and I'm showing what I consider to be our region here. The whole southern Caribbean and the Guyanas, Guyana, Suriname, the Orinoco, the southern Caribbean, Trinidad, Barbados, Grenada, St. Lucia, and see, can we find stories that were not documented? Can we find stories that were still passed on? What can we learn? What can we document? What can we preserve? And what could we transfer to future generations? Now I have some that were recorded, and I'm going to share them with you. I'm going to share some of the ones that I found, because there are so many. And the different tribes in these areas all have different versions of the same stories. But one of the interesting things I learned is that there's a lot of shared stories between all the tribes in these areas. A lot of, not exactly the same, but similar stories. I'm going to share a few of them with you. The first thing I want to say about astronomy in this region is that it's very different from in temperate parts of the world, because we're close to the equator. And by that I mean the orientation of the stars. If you're up in the northern latitudes, the United States or Europe, for example, Polaris is high in the sky, and all the stars rotate around Polaris. So their sky is built around rotation. And all of their indigenous astronomies are built around those rotations. When they came down here, they tried to apply that stuff, but it doesn't work like that here. Here in the Caribbean, because we're close to the equator, the sky doesn't revolve around Polaris. Polaris is low to the horizon. Instead, things come up on one side of the sky and go down on the other. It's not a rotation. It's a up, over, and down. The entire dynamic of the movement is different in our area compared to anywhere else. So that's the first thing, and that has impacts on how everything is understood. The most important star system that, as far as we could tell, what was recorded, is the Pleiades, known as the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters. I have words here. I don't know how to pronounce these words. I'm very sorry. If you all want to correct me, feel free. One of the things I hope to get from this is we could learn some of the proper pronunciation of these words. But I'm going to use, so the Pleiades, I have two words. I have one on the Arawak or Lokono side called Wiwa. And I have another word more on the Karina Kalinago side called Sirijo. I don't know if anybody knows those words. Sirijo or Wiwa. The stars of the year, the Pleiades. It's a group of stars, it's a cluster. I'll show you all what it looks like in the sky. But these marked the beginning of the year. They also mark the coming of the rains, depending on which area you were and whether you observed them when they rose or where they set. But by all accounts, for all the peoples in our region, across the islands and on the mainland, these were the most important stars in the sky. And so, I'm going to tell you a story. According to the things that I've read, the stories usually begin by saying, in the times when all things were possible. So I'm going to start with, in the times when all things were possible, there was a lady, a beautiful, beautiful girl in the tribe called Sirijo. And she, being one of the most beautiful maidens, was married to a great hunter called Epitimbo. Forgive me on the pronunciations. Sirijo was married to the great hunter Epitimbo, and he was known for his prowess and his skill and his ability. Now one day, Sirijo is working on her cassava fields. She's off planting, has his eyes on Sirijo. And he can't approach her, so he transforms himself into the form of a tapir. The tapir, yeah? And the tapir approaches Saricho. And every day the tapir goes closer and closer and gets accustomed, and he starts speaking with her. And eventually Saricho and Maipuri become very close in conversation. Very, very close. Until one day he asks her what he wants to ask her, which is, will you come away with me? Will you leave Epitimbo? Will you come away with me? We could go to the east. You see, remember I told you the stars come up in the east and they set in the west. And Maipuri is telling her, run to the east. We could go to the east and we could escape into the sky. Saricho says, no. I'm a married woman. My husband is a great Epitumbo. I cannot run away with you. So Maipuri says, I'll give you this axe. And he enchants an axe and he gives it to her and he said, this will protect you. So she says, okay. She holds on to his axe and Maipuri disappear. He leaves her. Now, just a little while after, Epitimbo tells Saricho he needs to collect some firewood and he wants her to pick avocado. He wants to pick avocados while she collects the firewood. So they go off into the forest and he climbs the avocado tree to collect the avocados while she's collecting firewood. But that axe, the enchanted axe, it's getting to her, it's speaking to her, and she's hearing it speak. And as Epitimbo comes down the tree, she takes the axe and the axe is telling her, I want to cut. And she slashes and she chops his leg off. And the foot falls off, flat on the ground, and she takes off, running to the east, leaving Epitimbo behind with his leg cut off, bleeding on the floor. Epitimbo plucks an eyelash, blows it into the air, and it turns into a bird. He tells the bird, go back to the village, speak to my mother, I need help. The bird flies off to the village to Epitimbo's mother, who comes and finds him bleeding on the floor, and she takes care of him. She nurses him back to health. He survives, but his wife is gone. He gets a crutch so he can move around, and he says, I need to find her, I need to chase her. Now, he's a hunter, he knows how to track. But now the rains have come, and the ground is muddy. The ground is muddy because of the rains, and he can't see her, he can't find their track anywhere. He goes around looking in all directions until towards the east, he sees avocado saplings growing out of the ground, and he knows they were picking avocados. She must have eaten the avocados, the seeds fell on the ground, and now they're growing. He knows which direction they went. He starts going east. And he starts following their trail, and he sees the avocado saplings, and he's following the trail, Keep going east towards the end of the world until eventually, in the distance, he spots them. Saricho and Maipuri. He being Epitimbo, the hunter, he picks up his weapons, bow and spear, and he goes after Maipuri and they fight. But Epitimbo is the hunter, and so he slays Maipuri, the tapir, and cuts his head off. The Maipuri, his spirit goes on. Epitimbo asks Saricho, come back with me. I've killed him, come back with me. And Saricho says, no, I'm not going back with you. And she runs to the east, and Maipuri's spirit runs to the east, and she throws herself up into the sky. And the spirit of Maipuri the tapir throws himself up into the sky, and Epitimbo behind them, and all three. And now they chase each other through the heavens. This is a picture of the night sky. And here we see the seven sisters, the Pleiades, Saricho, the Hades, Maipuri, the tapir, and Epitimbo, the great hunter with one leg, what we in the West we call Orion. Strangely enough, also a hunter for the Greeks, the great hunter Orion. And they move across the sky from west to east, Saricho in front, being followed by Maipuri, being followed by Epitimbo, a forever dance in the sky. Now the story is interesting, but there are levels and layers here to unpack, right? On the one hand, there's a morality story being told about how a husband and wife to treat each other and the expectations in society. On the other hand, there's the meteorology and there's the agricultural cycle. We know when Saricho rises, that's when you go to plant your cassava fields. We know when Maipuri rises, that's when the rains come and it's time to hunt. And we know when Epitimbo rises, that's when the plants start blossoming and it's time to reap. So the stories tell us about how to go about doing all of the things that we need to do, in addition to instructing us about the morality. And that's a pattern we'll find with these stories is that they had multiple purposes, and they had real purposes for meteorology, for zoology, for agriculture. I have another story for you. This one is more from the Central Arawak people, supposedly, and it's about the twin children of the sun, right? These twins feature a lot in the mythology, and they happen a lot in different stories. I have two names, Duid and Tuminkar. Again, the caveat with the pronunciation, but these are the two twin sons, and one is slightly older than the other one. Tuminkar is slightly older, Duid came after, he's the younger one. But here's the story that they planted a tree, and it was a great tree. It was particularly a silk cotton tree. Now, for anybody who is into Trinidad folklore, you'll know the silk cotton tree figures. In this story, it's specifically a giant silk cotton tree. And this tree, on it, grew every single type of food. All the different types of fruits, all the different types of food, everything growing off of one tree. And Duid was responsible for taking the food from this tree and carrying it to the people who lived in the village. The people had it easy because all the food was brought to them in all the great variety, because they would take it from the tree and bring it to them, and they would eat and they would not have to work. But you know, when people don't have to work, they get lazy and they get bored and they start wondering, and they start thinking, I wonder where he gets this food from. I wonder where he goes to get this. And so one day they decide to follow all the animals. And they followed all the animals when the animals went to eat from the tree. And they were able to find the location of the tree. And now the people of the village said, oh, we could get our own food from the tree. We don't need the twins, we don't need Duid and Tuminkar to bring us the food. We could get it for ourselves. And so they were proud and they were haughty. That did not go very well with the twins. Duid, when he heard what the people had done, how they intended to replace him, he chopped the tree down. The massive tree cut and fell down, and when it broke, water came out. The tree crashed to the ground and became the entire Amazon River. And then, reflected in the sky, the Amazon River on the ground, and the Milky Way, its reflection in the sky. So we had the great tree crash to the ground, become the river, and the Milky Way in the sky, its reflection. And he said to them, now, you all can no longer get food from the tree. If you want to survive, you go and you pick up the pieces, the branches of the broken tree, and each one you bring back, you could plant it in the ground and it will grow. But now you have to work hard, because the planting will not be easy. And so the people went and they took what they could. They couldn't get all the great varieties of food. They could only get the few little plants that they could put together. And that is how they came back with the few little plants that they knew how to grow. And now the food was hard to grow, and they had to spend their time working and toiling on the soil. So that's one story of the origin of not only the Milky Way, but the Amazon River. And we have other stories that tell how the rivers and the Milky Way are connected. So depending on the position of the Milky Way in the sky, we will know whether the rivers are going to be high with water or low, whether there'll be a lot of fish or less, based on the position of the Milky Way in the sky. This is a picture of the Milky Way I took while I was in Chile. And, you know, as we're speaking about the Milky Way, we saw the Atacamanians in Chile had the llama and the baby llama. Well, in the case of the Carib and Arawak peoples, it was a tapir and a jaguar. The same shapes, almost the same shapes, but now it's animals that occur in our area, the tapir and the jaguar in the dark areas of the Milky Way. If we want to look at the twins, the story I just told you, there's this area of the sky. This is what we call the Southern Cross in Western astronomy, and Alpha and Beta Centauri. But in this story, this is the Paui bird, or the Curacao bird, Paui. And the twins are Alpha and Beta Centauri over here. The two twins who are hunting the Paui bird. And again, this is something that we could look at and see in the sky. We could point out these constellations. I have one more story to tell, and this one is on Batapo, who is mother-in-law or grandma, depending on how you want to look at it. We will say the mother-in-law, and some people say the mother-in-law of Epitimbo, the same hunter, right? In this story, the mother-in-law is waiting for the children, Epitimbo and his wife, to bring food. And they're taking long. They're taking too long to provide the food. So what she does is she goes to his fish trap and she steals fish from Epitimbo's fish trap, right? Because they're taking too long. Now she's hungry, she steals. Of course, that doesn't make Epitimbo very happy. He's very upset when he finds out what his mother-in-law has been doing, right? So he goes to Okoyumo, the water spirit, and he complains to Okoyumo and says, my mother-in-law is stealing my fish straight out from my fish trap. This is wrong, this is unacceptable. So Okoyumo says, I will handle this for you. Tomorrow, ask her to come and collect fish from your trap. Ask her to come and collect your trap to you, and I will take care of it. So Epitimbo does that. He goes to his mother-in-law and asks her the next day to go and please fetch my trap from the river. But Okoyumo had prepared something. A school of wabin. You know wabin? Pataka? Wabin? Fish. Yeah? Fish. Massive school of wabin. And they're waiting for her. And as she goes in the water to collect the trap, they swarm her and they consume her. And all that's left is her head. And the head, not knowing what to do with herself, she sends herself up into the sky. And now she becomes the constellation of the face. Now, this is a constellation that we know from Western astronomy. It's called Canis Major, and this is a bright star, Sirius. It's the brightest star in the sky, but it's the face. And again, this constellation tells us when it rises in the east that the rivers are going to dry up and the fish are going to be easy to catch. And this is the revenge. This is the revenge that she's having on the fish that ate her body. And so again, the constellations, the stories not only tell us about the morality, but they also tell us about the practicality of when is the correct season to fish. Just a couple more constellations. This is a famous one called the Big Dipper. But in our stories, it's known as the canoe and the heron. So you have the shape of the canoe, and the heron is supposedly riding on the canoe. And again, it's associated with rainfall. And there's one last one I find it very, very interesting. And this has to do with the bright star Sirius. And it's called Maliribana. And it's associated with a particular deity, a particular zemi called Wabanasex. And this particular deity has a servant called Huracan. Huracan being hurricane. The point here is that this star, when it rises in the east, marks the beginning of the hurricane season in the islands. And the tribes knew this and understood this. And so they were able to predict when they see this star over here, because Maliribana is called, it's like a bad star. There's a saying that the return of Maliribana is unhealthy. Everybody knew it was a bad star, and it's associated with the hurricanes. And so they knew that when this star was rising in the east, now is not the correct time to be making long distance trips. This is the time when hurricanes can happen. And so they understood, using the stars and using the astronomy, that hurricanes were seasonal, cyclical, and could predict even the hurricane season based on the stars. So this is just a piece of what I've been able to find preserved in the literature concerning the astronomies. There's so much more. There's astronomies of the houses, the long houses, the round houses, and the orientations. There's more. But what I would like to see, these are structures that everybody in the world recognizes. This is Stonehenge in England. This is Chichen Itza in Mexico. And these are all astronomical observatories. right? They were used to observe the stars by the peoples in those areas. And what I'm saying is that we have here, this is Greencastle Hill, and this is a standing stone that was erect, and we're pretty sure that it was put there to observe the stars as well. And there are other areas, even in Trinidad, San Fernando Hill, we know that people came across, even from Venezuela, let's say the Warao, to come to San Fernando Hill, perhaps maybe to go up to the top to make astronomical observations. We have a history, we have a legacy, we have stories that give meaning to what we see in our skies and the animals that we have in our areas. And my hope and my dream is that hopefully sooner rather than later, we could take all of these stories and make them part of what we tell whenever we speak about astronomy in the Caribbean, whether it be in Trinidad or Puerto Rico or Guyana or Suriname, anywhere in this region, that whenever we speak about astronomy, we don't need to look and say that is Orion and that is the Big Dipper. Rather, we could tell the stories of Epitimbo and Sirijo, and we could tell the stories that the peoples of our area have told for centuries, and preserve the knowledge, not only in terms of stories, but in terms of the zoology, and when certain animals reproduce, and when to plant, and when to reap, and the morality of living in a village. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my message here this evening. Thank you all for listening, and I do hope that we could start a conversation with all of you here being representatives and members of this indigenous community, that we could start a conversation and work towards the preservation and upliftment of your and our culture. Thank you so very much.
Wow, wow, wow. I think he deserves another round of applause. Thank you, Issa, for sharing the stories of the peoples that you have met during your travels. And in the not too distant past, we in this region would have had dark skies without light pollution and been inspired by everyday life. And we do hope that you would be equally inspired to look up at the night sky and create your own stories from the patterns that you see, not just the patterns that other people have seen and told you to see. And his presentation really highlighted the importance of written history so that future generations can learn of what we have learned. And even in our region, in Trinidad in particular, the pathways that we currently traverse, exactly east to west, south to north, so I'm really inspired to write a story about perhaps our ocelot, our mountain lions, and so on. And now I feel from the audience that, after listening to this presentation, you might have had a question, a burning question, you're excited to know more. And so we would like to invite a few questions, right? Not too many, as we have to continue with our program. But do you have a burning question for our feature presentation speaker? Any questions about the night sky, about indigenous astronomy? Well, we do now want to invite Miss Audrey Christian from Suriname. And even from before the presentation, they could come. They have some information to share with us. So we're very excited to hear from their experience as well.
Thank you, Miss Sarah. My name is Audrey Christian. I got the introduction just. but I want to say a few things. I don't have just a presentation, just like, how is name again? Yes, okay. It is a short presentation, but it was for me necessary to give our insight, our view of our cosmology, indigenous cosmology. So, today is a remarkable day in the history of the indigenous people. 12 October is a day of devastation of indigenous people in the whole region. I think Chief Barat said that already, but it is very remarkable in our struggle of our land rights in Suriname. But we can use this day, this moment, for another start of renewal and reparation. The Western cosmology, how do you say it? Astronomy, yes. The Western astronomy is a knowledge that we as indigenous people did not know anything about it. We knew our traditional knowledge, and our traditional knowledge were the stars, the plants, the water, and also the animals. Okay, my mother, Tante Delma, who is not here with us anymore, she is not on earth anymore. She was a great contributor of the Santa Rosa community. Her wisdom she shared with a lot of people. A lot of students, she gave those teachings. And those students have now their own cultural groups. And here in Trinidad, she gave also her contribution in several knowledge, the traditional knowledge, also with others. So for me today to stand here is really remarkable, because all those contributors are contributors who had a lot of knowledge, indigenous knowledge. Okay. I want to talk about the time before, the time for the Western colonization and the astronomy of the indigenous people. They didn't have the technology, the Western technology that we now have, but they were just watching the stars, and then they knew that on a certain time they could go onto the sea for fishing, in the wood for hunting, and so. What my mother told me is that they came from South America and they watched the stars, they watched the plants, and then they knew that the sea was calm, and then they could come into the Caribbean to habitat the Caribbean. That was one thing. And that was the guidance that they used also for hurricane seasons. They knew that on a certain time they could not go onto the sea for fishing or into the wood in the bush to hunt. Okay, so the animals played an important role in our spiritual world. The spiritual world was very important. Moment. Yes. So you had different stars, and the stars were named after the animals, just like the Akuri. You know it as Akuti. The Arukuma, that is the star, one of the stars, and the Anuwana Yuma. The people before 1900 called it Anuwana Yuma. The Anuwana Yuma is the king vulture. And what his name is? No, the one that did the presentation before me, he called it Ipatwembo. And the Ipatwembo plays a very important role till now in our spiritual world. But that knowledge is lost. And in my research, I'm doing a lot of research of the indigenous culture, indigenous history, but also the spirituality. And one of the stories is that in my area, we call it the Wayambo River, the Kapanama River. There is a story, but it is not only an indigenous story, it is based on the truth. Certain time, that is in the month June, we know it now as June, but before we had a colonization, then it was not to recognize that moment. And one of this moment was the horizon of the star Ipatwembo in June. And when that star arose, then they know that it is a period of renewal, it is a period of beginning, new beginning, it is a period of harvest, cleansing. And that is the 7 stars that appear at the horizon. Until now, the indigenous people in the region celebrate this day, this moment in June, when the star appears in the sky as the indigenous New Year. But a lot of that knowledge is lost. In Australia, they celebrate this day and they name it Matariki. Matariki is on the 24th of June, and they celebrate this day in New Zealand. Okay. Then I will go back on the story that I gave before. The river, the Papanama River, and our Koyai and his helpers were on the mouth of the TBT River and the Papanama River. They were going there and they were doing a ritual, a ceremony with drums and maracas, and they were singing a lot of maraca songs. We call it Oremi with the maraca. And he began to sing. He began with the rattle, and his helpers also, and with the sambura drum. And at a certain time, he would dive into the water to make contact with the spirit of the water to celebrate this special moment. And that moment was when the star appeared at the horizon, the Ipatwembo. You know it as the 7 Sisters. Winston van der Bock also painted that. He is now not with us anymore, but he was also a famous, great artist of us. He was doing the painting just like George Simon, who is not here with us anymore. But those stories are really important for us as indigenous people, especially on this day, to give this message to you that we need to preserve our knowledge, we need to preserve our especially our traditional knowledge. It is very important for our children. Why is it important? It is important because if we don't know this knowledge, then we will lose our identity. And our identity is a part of us.